Hello, this is Todd Luck, and this is a review of Ultraman Tiga, the 10-issue miniseries from Dark Horse Comics from 2002, and the TV series Ultraman Tiga, which aired around the same time. So this is a very unique miniseries in Ultraman comics as far as, what came out in America. There is no other Ultraman comic that has this level of detailed art, which we can see in this back cover, and we'll get to see the interior. I promise you, it is amazing. And there is no other Ultraman comic in English that has been produced in America that is actually based on an Ultraman show. The other comics that have been put out take elements from the show and then they do something completely different with it. And, and that's fine. There's been some really interesting stuff. The last one we looked at, Battle of the Ultra Brothers, had Ultraman in space. Dwayne McDuffie had this ultimate Ultraman story with him fighting a bunch of monsters on the moon. But this is the first time and only time that they actually tried to adapt the TV series with actual adaptations of episodes. You have the full cast, the full concept from the show, and it's not exactly the same thing. It is an adaptation. It takes those characters and kind of remodels them, kind of redesigns them a little bit to, suit the sensibilities of the creators, and they change some things up. They make the fight scenes more elaborate, and they're really spectacular. Think of it as kind of what happened with Ghostbusters and Men in Black when they became animated series. They were very, very close to their source material, but the characters were redesigned a little bit, and various plot elements were changed here and there, but for the most part, they really kept that same feeling that was in the movies, and this is exactly, what Ultraman Tiga, the comic series, does. And so since the comic is so close to the source material, let's do a little mini review of the Ultraman Tiga TV series. It's good. So let me just elaborate on that a little bit. It is very much in keeping with the original series and what's come before it. There is an organization that investigates and fights monsters and aliens called GUTS, which is the equivalent, of course, of the Science Patrol in the original. There is a pilot who is the equivalent of Hayata, the hero. In the original, his name is Daigo, and he finds these statues of Ultras from this ancient civilization. They're actually the bodies of Ultras that have been encased in stone, and he's able to merge with one, and so whenever a monster attacks, he uses a transformation device to become Ultraman Tiga. And I'm just going to hold up this cool back cover by the interior artist of the comic to illustrate what Tiga looks like as I talk about the TV series. So obviously it's very in keeping with the previous Ultraman series, but it just does it so well. The things it does with monsters is just really amazing, and most of the designs for the monsters are just great. The stories are mostly good, but there's a wide variety. Just like the original series, there's a lot of episodes. You're probably not going to dig every single one of them, but there should be enough in there that you're going to love. If you like, Kaiju or Ultraman, this is a must-see series. And there's a really wide variety of stories in the Ultraman Tiga TV series. You're talking Ultraman versus vampires, Ultraman in virtual reality. There's an episode where there's a animal that gets turned into a giant monster, and they don't want to kill it because it's an innocent animal, but it's also going to eat people. So, they have that kind of problem that they have to deal with, and it's kind of interesting. So just all kinds of different stories. It is self-contained episodes. Now, they do go back and touch on that ancient civilization that the Ultras protected back millions of years ago in later episodes, particularly towards the end. The episodes don't necessarily feel like they're really connected to each other very strongly. It's kind of vague how all that could have happened, but it's still good. I mean, those episodes are really great, even if if it's kind of vague about, you know, the exact timeline and how everything fits together. And the same thing is true after the 50, I believe it's 52 episode TV series. They did a follow-up movie called Ultraman Tiga, The Final Odyssey, which was great. And it did follow up on that ancient civilization and that millions of years ago backstory, but did it in a very different way. But again, you know, they're good stories, and, you know, this comic book I'm about to show you puts another wrinkle on that. And, you know, honestly, if it's a good story, you know, that's all that matters. One thing I will say I did miss was the kind of quirky dialogue from Ultraman Towards the Future, which was produced in Australia. I wish we could have kind of got those guys to write the scripts for Tiga, because they just had some really clever, quirky characters in there. And the characters here are very dry. They're very, you know, kind of square-jawed, heroic characters. We do get enough of their backgrounds that you will be able to tell them apart. And they are a likable bunch. I mean, that is very important, you know, in your series to have likable heroes. But, you know, it is a more dry, serious series. There are some attempts at humor, you know, particularly in the later half of the series, but I just didn't find it all that funny. But I'm also not a Japanese child from the 90s. So, you know, it's not really made for me. But to be honest with you, you are not watching Ultraman, unless it's Towards the Future, for the dialogue. You know, you're watching it to see, you know, an Ultra's kicking giant monster ass, and you're going to get that done exquisitely in this series. And I mentioned the dryness of the Japanese series because when they did the English adaptation of it, Ultraman Tiga, which again aired a little bit before this miniseries came out, they decided to do some really strange stuff with the dialogue when they were adapting the story. I mean, it's not like Power Rangers. They don't shoot any original scenes other than there is a little bit of a transformation sequence that they piece together, that they slap in there. But other than that, it's just straight dubbing of the original episodes with, you know, with some cuts to make it, you know, fit within, you know, the time frame of an American episode. You know, our episodes are a little shorter than the Japanese, so they have to, you know, cut things here and there. But what they do that's really strange is, for some reason, they decide several times an episode to throw in a line that sounds like it comes out of Mystery Science 3000. And, you know, you'll just be going along, you know, and they'll be talking like normal, you know, like you would expect these characters talking, and all of a sudden there'll be some weird joke that'll come out of their mouth that sounds like, you know, the guys heckling the bad movies in Mystery Science 3000, and it's just like really, really strange. And I think it was to add humor to it. I think, you know, probably the source material was too dry, and I understand that concern, but this was not the way to do it. It is a little egregious that first episode, or maybe first few episodes. It tends to get less as the series goes on. It's less grating. And most of the episodes, fine. It's just there'll be those moments where they throw in that kind of dumb, you know, again, I call it Mystery 3000 humor, you know, kind of these juvenile jokes that just kind of take you out of it. Some of them are actually kind of funny. They're just feel out of place. That being said, I think the English dub is worth watching. I did enjoy it for the most part, other than those weird lines. There was one episode that they did screw up. I believe it's called Fugitives from Outer Space. I think the story there was just too dark for them. It's not the most satisfying one in the Japanese series, but the way that they rewrote it was just nonsensical. They showed characters dying and said they were teleported away. You really need to watch the Japanese version of that to understand what was really going on. But that's the only one they really just screwed up. And, you know, and mistakes happen. It's not a perfect dub, but, there was a lot of work that went into it. The voice of Joey Wheeler from Yu-Gi-Oh! Voices Daigo, which is a very kind of interesting voice to hear come out of your main hero. So that was really amusing, and plus the theme song is wonderful. I mean, but honestly, I recommend watching both versions just for the theme songs alone, because whether you are looking for someone to take you higher in the Japanese show, or you are looking for a man with all the right stuff in the American series, they are both really wonderful ear candy songs that will not ever get out of your head. And so the English dub was 20 some episodes, so they didn't get through the whole series. It was basically canceled within a season, and that's when this comic came out. So this was actually a comic that was planned to coincide with the second season of Ultraman Tiga in America, which unfortunately never happened, but we did get the comic, so that's awesome. And so let's actually talk about the comic. And we're going to begin with the one detractor to the series, at least to me, and that's the covers. And let me start by saying I love Udon Studios. They do amazing Street Fighter comics, but their art style just wasn't appropriate for these covers. This is an artistic tour de force. This interior artwork is honestly a masterpiece. And it's kind of hard to tell people about that and then hold up these covers that don't reflect that at all. It just, the art style just isn't reflective of the detailed, amazing art that's on the inside. It's good. If Udon drew the interiors, this would be a great cover. But it's sort of the equivalent of having Alex Ross paint your interiors and then putting John Romita Jr. on the cover. You know, I mean, John Romita Jr. is a fantastic artist, but it's just not going to be fair when you open up and see that spectacular Alex Ross art on the inside. Same thing here. That being said, some of the covers are better than others. This one, I think, is a nice art piece. I don't think it's a particularly strong cover because I've never liked the kind of collage cover, this style right here, where you just put random elements together from a series and slap it on a cover. But what I will say is that I would have loved this as a back cover, because this is a kind of a nice anime representation of what the characters look like in the show. However, as you're going to see, these characters don't look like this at all in this comic book, so that kind of adds to the confusion. And yeah, I just don't think the stylization on a lot of these covers works at all with this series. Some are better than others, though. This one is pretty darn close. I mean, Ultraman is still stylized in this kind of funky way, but it's not too far off from what you get on the interior. You get these nicely detailed monsters. The coloring kind of blends in, though. There's just a lot of earth tones here that just kind of blend in a big mess, you know, as far as the colors go. But, you know, I do actually like the pencils for cover 3. But then we go back to, you know, just some really funky, stylized stuff. Later issues introduce new monsters, and this series' version of the alien Baltaine. They're not called the Baltaine, but, you know, they look like them. And these actually produced the more intriguing covers from this series, including this one. But even in that instance, the back cover by the interior artist was way, way better. These back covers, they're not on every issue, but when they are, they're usually covers that were actually used for the original comic, which is from Hong Kong. And as you can see, the artwork on the interior is just super detailed. Lots in the background, lots of details on the monster, and just really well done as far as the storytelling goes. There's heavy anime influence, but it's very detailed, and again, it just really flows from panel to panel, just really well choreographed fight scenes that are just done in this really spectacular, epic way. And, you know, honestly, if they ever make an Ultraman movie that's like, you know, a big screen blockbuster, this is definitely a comic book I would hand to the people, you know, with that $200 million budget and be like, this is how you do it. And keep in mind, not every panel is this heavily detailed, but I just wanted to point out that some of this stuff is just insane. Like, this is just people running from a monster, so we have all these individually rendered people in this little panel with the sheep and, you know, animals that are running with them. I mean, it's just wonderful, the level of love and care that just goes into this artwork. It's just amazing. And I just want to give you an idea of the anime makeover that the characters were given. So this is the captain up here, and they gave her glasses. And this is Daigo down here, and they gave him this anime pilot look that I love. He just looks so cool in here. So the first 3 issues of the series are an adaptation of the pilot episode of Ultraman Tiga. They expanded, again, they put in this big scene from the ancient civilization that wasn't there in the original, and then they just really expand out the action in just a really spectacular way that is honestly, the stuff in the show is good, but this is something that you just can't do on a TV budget. That's just really amazing to see. If there was a Tiga anime, this is basically what it would have been. Issue 4 through 10 are actual original stories. Some are self-contained, some are 2 or 3 parts, and they're good as well. This series really 100% nails what Ultraman is all about. Whether you are coming in after watching Tiga, or you've only watched the 66 series, or you've never watched Ultraman, this is really just distills what an episode of Ultraman is like into its most pure and best parts, and turns it into this beautiful, beautiful looking comic. So it is a reprint miniseries. The series was originally printed in Hong Kong by Jade Dynasty, and I'm not sure why it was only 10 issues. They are each 48 pages a pop, so obviously there's a lot of material per issue, but it definitely feels like it could have kept going. It definitely has kind of the plot line is wrapped up, the series is not on that 10th issue, and I really wish they could have kept going. Jade Dynasty has actually done some other Ultraman comics, including Son of Ultraman back in the 60s, and this was a comic done by Tony Wong. Now, he is an accomplished artist. He is known as the Stan Lee of Hong Kong, or the Walt Disney of Hong Kong. He's that big. He really put comic books on the map in Hong Kong. He's founder of the company Jade Dynasty, and he is the actual writer of Ultraman Tiga, the miniseries, which is pretty awesome. I had no idea that, this prestigious artist from China actually wrote the darn thing, and that may explain one of the reasons why it looks so good. Usually if you have a writer who knows how to write visually, it just produces a better looking comic. A lot of Tony Wong's comics do have English translations. You can look that up on Amazon, and he also was the illustrator of Batman Hong Kong, a graphic novel written by Doug Minch at DC, and so that's probably worth looking up. And the artist on Ultraman Tiga is Kufuk Long, and you can look his stuff up too. He did a comic that was printed in America called Solar Lord, which I'm sure is also really spectacular looking. But it's really amazing to get that caliber of talent. I never even knew that Hong Kong comics existed, so I'm kind of curious about them now. As far as picking up the Ultraman Tiga miniseries itself, I highly recommend getting the full-size comic issues, but if you can't find them, and it can be hard, you can get the trade paperbacks, which unfortunately are smaller. I don't know why they printed them small, but they did. But there are 2 trade paperbacks that do collect all 10 issues. And so Ultraman Tiga gets my highest possible recommendation. Whether you are an Ultraman fan or you just like comics, this is absolutely 110% worth picking up. And this is a great high point in these retro review zone. This is the last American style comic that was produced with Ultraman before Marvel got the license to do Rise of Ultraman, which is currently coming out. So Ultraman has just had a really amazing run in American comics, with mostly top-notch talent putting out really top-notch stuff, or reprints of foreign comics that were also just really amazing to read. And you can go and look at my other reviews for you know, the other series that have come out in America. But there is one more Ultraman comic that was reprinted in English. It wasn't reprinted in American comic format, so I'm not counting it in these reviews, but there is a reprint in manga format of the Ultraman manga that is the basis for the Ultraman anime on Netflix, and that stars the son of Hayata, who was Ultraman's original host in the old series, and he puts on this armor and he fights human-sized monsters. Very different stuff, but just letting you know it does exist if you want to go out there and buy that. So that's it. I've got more reviews coming of various different comics, including Rise of Ultraman. We'll see how that one works out. And so like and subscribe for more videos. And until next time, see ya.